right, it's Dan and Brendan. We tend to show up every time, or sometimes when the president undertakes a new outrage.
Yeah, we don't do this every day, so it's not every time. It's just some of the time.
That's right. Yeah, we could do it several times a day.
That's right.
I don't know about you, Dan, but I'm beginning to think that how the Constitution works is not Donald Trump's strong suit.
You think, really? I'm reluctant to slander our esteemed. He's an expert in everything. I'm confident of that. But I'm beginning to wonder if you might, or could it possibly be that he simply doesn't care one way or the other what the Constitution says or does?
Perish the thought.
Perish the thought, yes.
So the latest, he has decided that by executive order, he is going to alter a federal statute, or at least how it's enforced, that I'll ask you to explain here in a second. But the bottom line is he's going after Twitter because Twitter had the temerity to tag a couple of his posts with fact checks, and he decided that anybody who would fact check him should pay the price. So, because we live in a banana republic now, and the rule of law is out the window. So
cannot question the dear leader.
No, that's right. And so he's threatening to go after Twitter. He went so far as in one tweet to threaten to shut it down. So we're going to do a series of little videos here, short videos about all the different ways in which Donald Trump seems to have misunderstood the Constitution under present circumstances. So first, let's talk about the law that he's trying to reinterpret, if you want to take that on.
Sure. What we're talking about here is a statute it's a federal law called the Communications Decency Act. And more particularly, he's going after Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which provides a good faith, safe harbor from liability for internet service providers. What does that mean? Say, for example, somebody says something nasty on the internet and Google links to it. You decide you want to sue Google. Here's what Google's going to do. Google's going to show up in federal court with a motion to dismiss. They're going to say to the judge, Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act insulates us from liability as long as we are acting in good faith. We acted in good faith. Wherefore, please dismiss. And the judge, almost like that, is going to say, yep, you're right. Case dismissed against Google under Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. It is pretty much impossible to overstate the significance of the Section 230 safe harbor to the internet service provider business model. This is how ISPs the world over have structured their business operations in reliance upon the very, very broad immunity that Section 230 provides. So, in going after Section 230, which is what Trump is doing with his executive order, and I guess we should both come clean on this, right? Neither one of us has looked to actually try to find the draft order. We're basing this on news reports that we're finding that describe what it is that his draft order intends to do.
Right.
Trump is going after Section 230, and he's doing that very purposefully and deliberately. This is not a simple shot across the bow of ISPs around the world. This is an attempt to shoot them right through the heart. This, in other words, is an effort by Trump to inflict maximum fear and terror on the part of ISPs from coast to coast and all around the world.
In typical Trumpian fashion.
That's right.
Now, we've identified a number of constitutional problems. We're going to divide it up, but the first is separation of powers issues. As I say in so many of my videos, Donald Trump does not understand the constitutional concept of staying in your lane. Each of the three branches has its own function. It is not up to one branch to make law, interpret the law, and execute the law. There's a separate branch for each one of those three functions, and the president's job is only to execute the law. Now, he seems like he's trying to rewrite more to his liking the good faith safe harbor provision, Section 230 that you just described. Two problems with that. Number one, he's not Congress, so he can't rewrite a law. And as to the Federal Communication Commission, did I get that right? The FCC?
Yes, the FCC.
Yeah, that's supposed to be an independent agency that Congress created and insulated from too much interference by the executive. An executive probably just like this one is what Congress had in mind when it created the FCC as what we would call a quasi-legislative, right, or quasi-executive. It's one of these bodies that sort of floats between or among the branches, and it's independent. It's supposed to be independent from them.
Right. Congress created administrative agencies. These things have been around forever and ever, right? Since the rise of the administrative state in the FDR administration, these federal administrative agencies have been around, and they do, in fact, some of them anyway, exercise a sort of hybrid set of powers. They make regulations, which is a form of law. They interpret those regulations, which is something that courts normally do. And they enforce those regulations, which is something that the president normally does. So a lot of people are going to say, well, what's the beef then? Who cares, right? If this is what agencies do, this is what the FCC should be doing here. Not so fast. There are a couple of different categories of federal agencies. There are traditional executive type agencies that are under the direction and control of the president in most or all important ways. But that's not the way Congress set up the FCC. Congress set the FCC up deliberately as what we call an independent agency. Congress wanted to put some light between the president on the one hand and the FCC on the other, precisely because Congress foresaw an instance where an incompetent, unethical, hackish political operative like Donald Trump might try to commandeer the FCC, which, after all, has the authority to regulate rather broadly channels of communication all across this country. Congress didn't want somebody like Donald Trump taking control of the FCC for his own political or personal purposes. So the answer to this is what administrative agencies do is not so fast. Congress created this as an independent agency for lots of good reasons.
Right. So he's trying to commandeer an agency that was supposed to be independent against the will of the people who drafted the law and created the FCC. So
correct.
That's a separation of powers problem. The other problem is his interpretation. Again, we're looking at news reports, but from what I can tell, his interpretation of the immunity granted under Section 230 is going to be at odds with the interpretation given to that law by federal courts, whose job it is, after all, to interpret and apply the law in individual cases. So we have a second separation of powers problem there.
Correct. The federal courts at all levels, the district courts, circuit courts of appeal, and the United States Supreme Court have for years and years broadly interpreted the 230 safe harbor consistent with the apparent congressional intent that 230 provide very, very broad immunity for ISPs. Now, I would be the first to stand in line and say, I think the 230 safe harbor is way, way, way too broad. But it does not follow from that Donald Trump should be the one who decides what the scope of that immunity should be. That's a job, as you point out, that belongs to a democratically elected Congress. That's where it should be done.
So in terms of separation of powers, which is a broad constitutional principle, we have a problem here. We're going to talk about other problems in other videos, but to summarize, the problem here is we have a president, and this isn't the first time, who thinks that it's his job, or wants it to be his job, to make the law, to enforce the law, and to interpret the law all by himself. And Again, not to get too political here, but if there's one person ill-suited to any one of those three functions, it would probably be the guy in the White House right now.
That's right. Yes. This is not the first time that he's tried to do this, but I think it is, to be fair. I think it is the first time he's tried to do this today. Would you agree?
Okay. Right. Well, there's still a few hours left, so we'll see what else he comes up with before the sun goes down. But okay, well, that's enough for this short video, and we'll be back to talk First Amendment in the next one.